Hey, good. How are you guys? And this video is gonna talk about the infamous Siege of Baghdad. The first one, the most famous for that title. We know that 2003 also there was another Siege of Baghdad, but there's many Sieges of Baghdad after this one. But the first one that involves the Mongols in 1250 something, that would be
1258, right?
1258. Yep. uh, and it lasted for 2 weeks, or to be exact, 15 days. All right, before we get to the siege itself, we need to, we have two things. First, we need to introduce our friends from the Goofy Historians channel. Um, you have over here David and Joseph.
I'll go first. So thank you, Ali. We are in fact the Goofy Historians team here, and we're delighted to again work with our favorite YouTuber from New Zealand, Ali, who's very knowledgeable about this subject and wrote quite extensively for us for our show notes on this. And I just wanted to kind of like take a step back in time. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the setup to this, but the video is on the Siege of Baghdad. And I just wanted to take you back there. Like on January 29th in the year 1258, did 1 million plus inhabitants of the mega city of Baghdad know that their world was ending? This is a question we may or may not answer in this non-humorous history podcast. It's non-humorous, so we don't have to be funny, but you never know. So today, like I said, we're presenting the Siege of Baghdad with Ali. And this, became known as the end of the Golden Age of Islam. It covers the destruction of the House of Wisdom, which is, Ali points out, is like the even worse than the Library of Alexander. Go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, I think I'd like to say something. If there's any, besides living in Silicon Valley at the beginning of the 21st century, I think that the one place I would, if I had to pick another place to live in history, it would have been at the beginning of the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. About 800 BCE, right when the beginning of the Golden Age of Islam, and the, like you said, the Bayat al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. That was like, if you could imagine, like MIT and Harvard and Yale and Cambridge, all combined into a single university, right? And besides just the science, and the massive amount of linguistic activity was going on. There was lots of art and science, and it was the most populated city in the world. Maybe besides maybe someplace in Song, China, but I think it was the place to be. So it didn't stay that way. By the time we get up to the Siege of Baghdad, it was no longer a political force. It was no longer a military force, but it was still a cultural force to deal with. It was like New York, right, or Paris of that time. So if you could imagine all of a sudden a combination of New York and Paris all of a sudden disappearing within a week, that's the impact of the siege of Baghdad. So a lot of Westerners don't realize the impact this had on world history, right? So if you put it in terms of today, have New York and Paris disappear in a week, that's the amount of impact we're talking about, of course, 800 some years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And in terms of the library, it wasn't just the House of Wisdom. It was also 36 public libraries also got burned and destroyed. Now we need to get to a little bit of an introduction to the topic, so some background, and very quickly we need to talk about. Um, let's begin with the end of the Umayyad dynasty. Actually, just two sentences about the Umayyads. So nobody was happy about the Umayyads because they broke the system of the caliphate. Like most people, most scholars don't even recognize the Umayyad and the Abbasids as caliphates. They're more like sultanates because they do use kingdom-like, monarchy-like system in terms of who gonna take the control, like who's the leader afterwards, because like father to son, father to son, and previously the caliphate is more or less like democracy, but different flavor. Not really democracy, but like this. The closest example would be democracy. It was like the word they used is shura, which is like asking, which is in Arabic, it's like asking the one besides you whether this one will be good or this one will be good. It's like more tribal based, but like democracy like system. However, the Umayyad came with the kingdom. They made a kingdom like. And the Abbasids supposed to change that, but then a group within the Abbasid betrayed another group, and then there's another group betrayed them, and then they just kept the old system. And the main goal for the Abbasids, which they got their support for, died, and it continued the same way. But the Abbasid understood the mistakes of the Umayyads, didn't do them, and for that they continued instead for 160 years, not sorry, 130 something years. Their dynasty gone on for slightly over 500 years, which is a lot. It's like that's more than the length of Han China, which is like really rare.
The Roman Empire. Yeah.
It's really rare for empires to go over 400 years. And very quick about the Abbasids, of course, the Abbasids murdered all the family of the Umayyad, or most of them, and then one guy and his little family escaped, and they made the Umayyad Caliphate in Spain, and then later became the Emirate of Cordoba. And that's a different story, but just a bit of tangent. There's also the Abbasids weren't really fully properly Muslim. Like they were far, at least in the beginning, they were far more vicious and monstrous, like at least to specific people, because they wanted to secure their control. Again, don't forget, this is not the same Abbasid at the beginning of their revolution, because their revolution in the beginning was silent, and intelligence like CIA, like there's a lot of assassination and the background stuff were going on. And that began when they understood that the Umayyad were weak because of a revolution in Morocco, which actually succeeded. Now, Abbasid now in control. Because that's a different story, but it's very important to understand whom are the Abbasids and what's the environment just slightly before the Siege of Baghdad.
Can I say, so what I understood was that the Umayyads were, I don't know how to say it, more narrow-minded. It was, they spoke Arabic and everybody spoke Arabic, and you had to be sort of mainly from the Arabic culture in order to succeed, where the Abbasids were more Persian, right? And so they were inheriting the culture from Persia, and also the culture which was, before that was Alexander the Great, right? So there's Greek culture. It seems like, and they gave up Arabic as the language of power, right? They kept Arabic as the language of religion, but in terms of power, the language became Persian, not Arabic. And I think they were open, and that they did this big translation project where they were translating Greek and Latin and Chinese and Sanskrit to Persian and to Arabic to make all this universal world culture available to the Islamic Empire. And I think that was the origin of the golden age of Islam. It was like a liberal a liberal, open culture. I mean, they were still Islamic, they were still Muslim, but it was much more open than the Umayyads were. So
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
it would have been a nice. And when you went to Baghdad in the 900s, 800s, there were Christians hanging out.
Yep. And about uh, the Abbasid transaction thing is they were in the beginning sort of a speak Persian based, but then later on it also was Arab people based because based on the house of Abbas, which is the uncle, one of the uncles of Prophet Muhammad. The thing is, later on, all that translation from Arabic to Persian and other languages, all that to please the Persians because we're the main backbone of Abbasid power. It was more political move. Um, the Abbasid like these little political move just to please people every now and then. The basically they just like a sponge. They just when there's a political power, they just like give lies or give half lies, and then just calm down the people. So the main leaders don't have supporters, and that's how they continue for a long time. Also, there is the point of there's one more very important point, and that is, oh yeah, about the golden age of Islam. The golden age of Islam continued after Baghdad, but it wasn't nothing like it was before. Um, the main reason is as they build the city of Baghdad, because city of Baghdad didn't exist before. The Abbasid, the first leader of the Abbasid, al-Mansur, Jafar al-Mansur, he built the city of Baghdad mainly to get away from Damascus because all the people in Damascus are basically Umayyad supporters. In the same time, Kufa is a bit funny. That's a whole different story. So he built a whole new city. And in the beginning, it was
So
only
wanted
the
a fresh
circular
start.
bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the beginning, it was only the circular bar, which is like three-layered circular fortification that could house maximum 600,000 people. Then the city expanded outside of those. And when he built the city,
So in a way, Baghdad is sort of like Washington D.C., right?
yeah,
It was a created city, right? What other city was created? I guess, yeah, maybe
Hong
Beijing was
Kong,
created. Yeah,
Beijing is old. The new, because modern Beijing would be like a new Beijing, like yeah, it's similar to how it was before. The name Beijing is ancient, goes back to the Qi during the Seven Warring State period.
I thought, well, the Beijing was basically as a capital city was created by the Mongols. It probably was something before that, but it wasn't a power thing until the Mongols.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
I know a city that was created from scratch. This is
yeah, it
great.
wasn't created
So
from scratch. Yeah, yeah.
there was one. There's one in the United Kingdom called Milton Keynes. And when you go to that city, it's not like you're in England. It's like you're in America. It has blocks and stuff like an American city. It's terrible. Don't go there.
don't go there.
Go ahead.
Never mind. Yeah. Okay, but still, the Baghdad was created by the first I don't know, what you call him, caliph of the Abbasids as their capital city. And you're right, to get away from Damascus.
Yep, and then later on, leaders of the Abbasids or caliphs, if people will, because that was their main title, but it's kind of it's like a sticker. They stick there because they're the most powerful. They just can't call themselves whatever. So then later on, these caliphs had a lot of money aside. So
I want to still know. My question is, if we can ever answer it, did those 1 million plus inhabitants of Baghdad know on January 29th in the year 1258 that their world was over, or they thought that they could defend their city. And you kind of argued, Ali, that they could have defended their city. They made a bunch of mistakes. Is that where I was kind of reading?
Yeah, that is true. That's true, but we're still in the introduction.
Yeah, we're still. Yeah, you jumped up a few hundred years.
Yeah, there's two more points to explain. The first point. Yeah, the first point is the House of Wisdom came to existence because the cows had a lot of money aside. They didn't know what to do with it. Even though they gave a lot of donations, charity, and stuff like that, that's separate from the zakah money. So they didn't know what to do with it. So then they built the House of Wisdom.
Yeah, it was sort of like a modern day mega church. That's not taxed.
Yeah. And there's also, we need to explain a few points about the economic strategy of the Abbasids. And that is first, it's the same economical strategy from a bird overview as the Umayyads and as the first caliphate. Muslims, they don't get taxed. Women's in general, they don't get taxed. Of course, capable Muslims would pay the zakah, 2.5% of their wealth. So the wealth would be taxed, not the income. And they had the control of the trade routes, especially at the beginning, at least, there was the Silk Road. Then it got cut off because China didn't like it.
I heard that. You can tell me if I think it's true that basically there was like a non-Muslim tax, so like the Christians and Jews paid a specific tax because they weren't Muslims.
Yep.
So there was basically no forced conversion, right? When Islam took over these countries, nobody was forced to convert. But if you didn't convert, well, you had to pay a tax. But
unless you're a woman, you don't pay a tax.
Unless you're not, unless you're a woman,
adult men, only to adult men.
I guess you. So I heard like a lot of Christians actually, when they were being persecuted by other Christians, they actually moved to Islamic land and just paid the tax and say, at least we can, not be killed by other Christians. At least the Muslims aren't killing us. They're just taxing us, which is a little bit of an improvement, but better than being burnt at the stake, right?
Yeah.
Pay your 12.5% for not being a Muslim. And then I heard that later, like people got tired of paying the tax and they go, okay, I'm ready. I'm converting to Muslim. I'm becoming converting to, and they go, no, you can't. We need your tax money, right? We can't. You can't be converting.
Yeah,
if everybody converts, we're going to lose this tax source.
Yeah, that happened with the Umayyads for a bit, but the main problem happened with the Abbasids, and they didn't solve it. Like, then it caused a lot of problems. They shouldn't have taxed anybody who converts, but like it's a bit of dilemma. But they didn't need the money source because most of that money tax was because as empires, it's a bit corrupt. Most of the tax actually from non-Muslims goes to fancy stuff for the rulers, especially not exactly the main ruler, but the people underneath the ruler.
So, the local rulers.
So they didn't need actually the money, but the local rulers felt that they would lose power because that money is used to secure themselves, because that's how warlords began to happen. And that's actually a good transition to the final point, is the Abbasids started to lose the main power. It's using this extra money to the local leaders. Those local leaders started to search for funny ideas, any idea that will rally people behind them against the main caliph, against the Abbasids. Mainly the main argument they proposed was because the Abbasid didn't do what they told the people they're gonna do. the two things, like returning the caliphate system back to the shura system and stuff like that, and other points like that.
Right. Wait. So can you explain to us? So when as opposed to the Shia, right, where you have to be in a bloodline with Muhammad or something, and it's sort of prearranged. In the Sunni, which is the Abbasid, and I guess the Umayyad too, when one caliph dies, I guess you're a caliph for life, right? It's not like you get to retire, right? I have no idea what I'm talking, but I'm assuming you don't retire if you're a caliph.
You can retire, and it is not for life. It's for 12 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, this is so. I don't think. Well, I'm sure I didn't know that. So you're a caliph. So you're like the head for like 12 years, and then you retire, and then someone else gets
that's
elected?
the system. Yeah, that's the system in the first caliphate. But then the Umayyads broke it, and then the Abbasids are supposed to return it, but then they broke the promise.
So they didn't do that.